In this lecture, we're going to take a look at how to add legends to your leaflet map. And we'll start here with HTML. And as you can see, in HTML, all it's in the first part of this is a standard leaflet connection to the style sheet and the JavaScript library. We'll then take a look at our CSS code. And what you can see happening in my map here is I have these circle markers that have been colored according to a category and sized according to another feature of the data. And then I have a legend on the side of the page here that tells me, that matches the color with the appropriate name or label as to what that's being represented by on the map. So if we take a look at our CSS, you'll start with your regular HTML and map definition, but you also need to add into your code a class for the legend, a class for a container that's called I, so legend I we're calling it, a .info, and a headline for your .info can be added as well. And you'll see where these are utilized once we put together the actual JavaScript. So looking at the JavaScript, the top here, I started out, in this case I'm just using some internal data, and my data is set up so it's called my points, and I just have the array here. It's an array of arrays. First value is just the number, latitude, longitude, and then I was basically putting different breakfast foods into this list. And so we're going to map our data based upon that. If I move down next, I have a function called getColor, and basically this will return the color as specified here based upon the feature's food item. So now moving down into line 34, what I have is I have a loop that will load my data in, and it makes my circle marker, and so I'm putting in the latitude, the longitude. My radius is being set right here, taking the number, I'm dividing it by 2 and then adding 5 to it. So I know my smallest size would be 5. If I turn that off, you can see these being all the same size circle. Next is the fill color. And for the fill color of the circle, I'm just passing the name, so location 3, so 0, 1, 2, and 3 of the array, passing that value to my getColor function. It checks the word. If the word matches, then it uses that color. If they don't match, then it would become white. So if I called this one, if I misspelled cereal on this particular one, I get a white circle right over Ames. Then the next step is go ahead and we have a category, I guess the bind to pop up as well. It's listed here, but we can add this to the map. And then we finally get to move on to the legend. And the legend is a layer control, and we first just create a new layer control called legend, and one of its properties is its position. We have choices of top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, so we could make this be bottom left. And it moves it to the bottom left, and we'll leave it there for now. And that completes creating the value for the legend. Now what we want to do is when that legend is created as a control and it's being added to the map, it should basically populate itself with certain information. And so the way we go about creating this legend is the code. Now it's in line 52 through 66. And we make a new variable, and this variable is called div, and it's inside the function. So it's not a global variable, but our variable div is a leaflet DOM utility that will create a new div, and we're going to use the info and legend class on it. We have a variable called breakfast, and I've specified what those key items are. We could also have labels. Now the difference here that we have, because the reason we have two arrays, is sometimes your data might contain a number, and instead of displaying a number in your legend, maybe you want to display a value. I have another JS bin that was part of the task sheet on Introduction to Legends that illustrates that, and we'll take a quick look at that momentarily. So now we have those two arrays set up, or I guess the label is not set up, but I have it here as a null array anyway. What we're going to do is we're going to loop through the items, and so this is the list of items. We're going to loop through that list of items, and we're going to go to the color checker, or this get color function up on top here, find out what color was supposed to be applied to it, and create a new square, so the legend square, with that color, and then add the text for the label, or in this case the label is the same as this value, and put that on the page. So the way we go about doing this is we have a loop. It looks at the length of our array called breakfast, and then it makes a new div, which is an inner HTML command, and in this div we're using this I as our selector in this case, I guess, and in there we're setting the background color, and so the background color for breakfast, number 0, which is going to be apple, it goes up and it looks up in our get color function, finds out what apple is, gets its color, brings that color back so it knows the background now is that color, and it then finishes that tag. Then it adds to it the text that we want to follow the colored box. Now I want to open up the CSS so you can see some changes here. So what we're working with, we said this is our legend, and first of all let's take a look at the box that's being used for the legend. In this case the background of this box is this item right here. You'll see I have two backgrounds in this code. You can actually delete one. Whenever you have two items, it goes with the last one listed. Alright, so we have that. Here's our background. If we want to, we could change that and put a 0 in here instead. You can see it changed the color of the background of the legend. Our box shadow is illustrated here, and this is the box shadow. You can look up box shadow on the W3C site to see the parameters. But basically we're setting the offsets and how much blur there should be in the shadow, and should it be directly behind the item or to the left, to the right, so many vertical spaces, as well as the color of the drop shadow. In this case it's black with a slight transparency. The radius, if I change this to 15, you can see what happens. I get more rounded corners on my legend. And that gives us our info style that's being used on this legend. Then we have our text size is being set right here. So if we went small, it starts to mess our items up. You do have to play with this a little bit, because if your text is too big, things will wrap funny because the boxes aren't the same height. And so the height for the legend itself is controlled with this .legend I. And so if I make this height on this item be 26, my boxes for the colors got bigger, but it messed up the order in which these things flowed together because it's taller than the text line. So if anything, the height of this legend should always be either at or smaller than the font size being used for the text. If we bring this down to, say, 15, I have smaller boxes and I have white space between the boxes, and that might be the effect you're looking for. Go to 19, we get a very slight space between them. I'm going to set mine 20 because I want it to be kind of a continuous flow. And that'd be kind of cool to use that if you're using a high to low and using an intensity. You might only label the top one being high, the bottom one being low, and then put no labels in between and just show color. So back to our JavaScript. So I mentioned it loops through each of those items: apple, banana, cereal, donuts, and eggs, gets their color, and then that's what it uses to create this div. That is then returned as a div to the legend control and added to the screen. And down here we see legend.add_to_map. So this is an example. Go ahead and play with the JS bin that goes with this project and see what you can do to modify it to meet your needs. Looking here at one more legend example, this is from the task sheet that I referenced in lecture. Pretty much the same setup on the front end with the HTML and the CSS as before. In fact, I'm using the same points as I used in the other example, except I don't have the extra fourth element that talked about a breakfast food. In this case, I'm most interested in the number, and not to change the size of my items, but to set their color. And so what I added to this was I added two arrays. The first array I have is what I call breaks, and this is what is telling me where the color breaks are. I'm going to have then a good, a fair, and a poor possible label in my legend, and you can see those here. I have good, fair, poor. And so what this part of the code's doing is it's saying anything that's greater than 17 should be classified as good, and if it's then not greater than 17 but it's greater than 12, it's fair. If it's not greater than 12 but greater than 0, it's poor. And that's the labels I'm going to use. So when I come down here now for my get color function, this one's got just a lot of code in it and that you can look at that demonstrates how you can pull the value of a array into this get color function. So here I'm returning D if D is greater than whatever is stored in the array item breaks 0, which is 17. And it just works its way down. And then I have the colors associated with those different values. You know, if I change this to, let's see, let's go to 22. On the map to the right, there'll be fewer green ones in just a moment. And I'm down to just 2 green items at that point. Bring it back to 17, and now I have 4 green items on the screen. So that part of it just works for drawing the points. I also do have, again, the tooltip on these so you can see what the value is. If we move down in the code, this is where I've drawn the points here at this point, or at this location in the code. We can move down again to the legend editor. I've got it on the bottom right, and I'm going through and adding it just like I did in the previous example, except here I am pulling the value from the labels array to use as my text because I didn't want to use the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 in here because those numbers aren't a one-to-one relationship. It's a range of values. So if the range of values was in the good category, then that's what's being represented in my legend. So this is just an example of how you can take data with many values and have it represented on the map using just 3 thematic data layers.